On this episode of Phinside The NFL, listen, is the new GM, whoever it may be, are they going to be handcuffed to Tua Tagovailoa and Mike McDaniel for at least 2026? We're going to talk about that. Plus, the trade deadline is this Tuesday. It sounds like we have a potential suitor in the NFC East for Jaelan Phillips. Plus, we'll have some interesting updates regarding Jaylen Waddle in the trade deadline. We got a lot to talk about. Do me the favor, smash the like button. Subscribe if you are new. And as always, let's get into this.
Touchdown! Got it! You have got to be kidding me. Jaylen Waddle has a Dolphin touchdown. And he will score! He's the field on the near side, man open, touchdown! The run from Tua Tagovailoa. Touchdown! He's going deep. He's going up for the touchdown again! Touchdown! Beautiful day to be a Dolphin fan. Let's go!
What is good, Finn Nation? What's good? It's your boy Reason. We are back here for another one. I'm dressed in all black because not only did our Dolphins lose this week, but it's tough being a sports fan. I had to watch my Blue Jays absolutely choke away the World Series in Game 7, top of the 9th inning, after the night before catching a very bad break on that Barger ground rule double on the ball that got wedged in the outfield. Man, I mean, I could say so many things. But, you know, it's a choke job. You had a chance to cash in with the bases loaded bottom of the 9th. Again, you know, final inning, bottom of said inning, down by 1 after a Will Smith home run. Runners on first and third. 1 out. You got a chance to, again, at least tie it. You don't. I mean, choke job. So, painful time. Painful time for me as a sports fan. Because, I mean, I had real high hopes for that Jays team. They were certainly pushing it to the limit, but it just wasn't enough. It just wasn't enough. But I hope everyone does. Hey, at least it's Sunday. Hopefully your clocks went back. That's first thing. And then on top of that, I mean, let's be real here. I hope you enjoy your carefree day with no football. Isn't it just absolutely, I mean, you know, they already ruined your your Thursday. They can't ruin your Sunday, right? So, but there is quite a bit to talk about today. And before we do get into everything, I want to shout out the sponsor of today's video. That, of course, is Sleeper. Listen, you think you know football? All right, so then go sign up for Sleeper right now. And you want to know why you should? Because, man, you could turn your football knowledge into some real money with that Sleeper app. It's the ultimate fantasy sports app that can turn game day into payday. Listen, with more stats than any other daily fantasy app, just choose 2 or more of your favorite players from pregame or live. Pick more or less from the predicted stats, and you could win up to 1,000 times your money if your picks win. Use promo code Phinside and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions do apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. And if you sign up right now, no deposit required, using my code Phinside, you will get a free $20 to play around with. So go check out the sponsor of this video. That, of course, is Sleeper. So, I mean, you know, not having to worry about an inactive report. Oh man, it's Sunday in real life, man. But the Dolphins were a hot topic. Funny enough, a cornerback a lot of us wanted in the offseason, in the preseason, into training camp, Jaire Alexander. He actually got traded. Remember, the Ravens went ahead and signed him, but now he's been traded to the Philadelphia Eagles. And keep that in mind, the Philadelphia Eagles, because they're going to pop up again in this episode. That's for sure. So we got a lot to talk about, though. So let's go ahead. Let's start to get into it. And I hope all of you had a fantastic Halloween. I do say, one of my favorite things as a parent is just taking your kids out for Halloween. And, we have a street around us. They had an evil carnival. They have another place, this Dr. Zombie's haunted house. It's just fantastic stuff. And it's just such a big community. So anyways, man, Halloween, one of my favorite nights of the year. I hope you guys all had a fantastic Halloween. And if you just had a good Friday night, I hope you did. It didn't get much better after the trick-or-treating for me. Freaking Jays. All right. So let's go ahead. Let's start to get into this. And I think one of the things when Chris Grier got fired, I want you to put your feelings about Chris Grier getting fired in the comment section. Listen, I also want you all to go ahead and answer this question. Would you handcuff the next GM, whether it's interim right now or whether it's someone outside the building? Would you handcuff them with Tua Tagovailoa and Mike McDaniel? Do you think that's smart business? Do you think that's a smart move? I want to hear from you down below, all right? Anyways, beyond that, we got to talk about the situation because this is something that, we talked a little bit about after Grier got fired. I'm going to be coming out with another video on Monday that I think a lot of you guys are going to like. I might go live for it. I don't know, but I'm going to be coming out with a video on Monday that I think you guys are really going to like too regarding this whole situation. So keep it locked for that. And if you're new here, go ahead and subscribe, smash that like button. But, for me, a couple things about this situation right now. I've made it known I didn't like how Stephen Ross and Garfinkel meddled when we hired Mike McDaniel, right? You had to make Tua right. You had to keep Austin Jackson, Eichenberg, these high draft picks. Grier was a part of it. There was a lot of meddling going on, right? Not letting, he wanted Fangio year one. They said, no, you got to keep Boyer. You got to keep Danny Crossman, blah, 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 blah. All this meddling, right? And I think it needs to go away. Dallas Cowboy fans will tell you they're sick of Jerry Jones. And I've said this. I don't like the meddling. And we're going to talk about this in depth here because Tom Pelissero, he was on Rich Eisen. And this is what he had to say. And I'm telling you, this is going to be an issue, but let's talk about this. I want you to listen because there's a couple things he says. He talks about McDaniel and Tua, but he also talks about what other GMs around the league said about Chris Grier and his work in Miami. Check this out.
And listen, Champ just got there. He was hired this year as a senior personnel executive. I saw him briefly in training camp. He may not be a part of the long-term vision either, but at least it allows there to be sort of a reset here. It certainly is going to generate more phone calls as this thing rolls forward. And the next question then becomes, is Mike McDaniel going to be a part of the club into 2026? And here's what I would say on that front, Rich. Mike is another guy that Stephen Ross believes in. He extended his contract in the prior offseason in 2024. He has shown that he can be an effective NFL coach. He has been to the playoffs. He has won games. He came into this season with a winning record. Obviously, this season has not gone his way. But take into account the broader picture of where we are right now with the Dolphins. They are locked in with Tua Tagovailoa for over $50 million fully guaranteed in 2026. And I brought this up on this show a month or so ago when questions were first really arising about Mike McDaniel's status. If you were to fire Mike McDaniel, which again, is it possible that happens? Sure. We got to see how, the next couple of games go. They're in Spain in a couple of weeks. And then obviously they've got a bye and then a half dozen games after that. Let's see how the rest of the season finishes. But I would just say Tua at over $50 million fully guaranteed might not be an extremely attractive option to head coaching candidates who are coming in, especially given his medical history and the up and down state of his play through the course of 2025 here. There is certainly a scenario, and again, we will see exactly how this goes, but there is certainly a scenario in my mind where you take a vision to what's going on with the bigger football operation here, bring in a person or multiple people to try to get things right, keep Mike McDaniel for one more run with Tua, who is a quarterback who Mike got the job in part because he was the one coaching candidate back in 2022 who said, I can win with this guy. Give him one more shot with a lot of different moves in terms of personnel, with a new GM or maybe a head of football operations calling the shots here. And then you make the decisions at the end of 2026. By and large, I'm not a fan of jagged transitions. I'm a believer that if you get people who are on the same timeline and reboot the whole thing at once, that has advantages. But in a case like this, where you're tied for that much money to a quarterback that the coach has shown he can get the most out of, at least he has over the first few years that Mike and Tua were together, don't discount the possibility here of Mike McDaniel still getting another crack at this in 2026. But when other general managers within the league looked at what is holding back the Dolphins, one thing they always said was it seemed like you had this collection of talent versus building a team. It was hard at times to tell what was the vision, what was the roster building plan that they felt like were going to allow the Dolphins to get into the playoffs and win a playoff game for the first time in however 20 years or so it's been for them. Even this offseason, think back to the way that Miami navigated this. They had made a decision shortly after the season last year to trade Jalen Ramsey, but they really didn't ramp that up until April. You end up not trading Jalen Ramsey until the week of the 4th of July. You do that while also trading away your tight end. You acquire a guy in Minkah Fitzpatrick who's available from Pittsburgh, in part because the tape just wasn't the same on Minkah for a couple of years. Then you acquire a Darren Waller who'd been out of football, looked great, obviously, for a few games. Then he gets hurt. In camp, everybody knew they were short on corners after trading Jalen Ramsey. You're signing Jack Jones, you're signing Roswell Douglas, and you're rolling them out there to play games. Those were all some of the factors that when people evaluated the Dolphins, it just didn't entirely make sense the way that they were approaching things.
So a couple things here. All right. Number one, the reason why I was smiling so hard when they were talking about what GM said about the roster building and the vision and basically saying no one understood what they were building that was sustainable. What do I always talk about? Teams like the Ravens, the Steelers, the Packers, they have these front office blueprints that have been around for 20 plus years that they continue to build off of, no matter who the coach is, no matter who the GM is. You know, talk about the Ravens. Why do we love Ozzie Smith? Ozzie Newsome. Ozzie Smith, think about baseball, huh? Ozzie Newsome so much. Why do we love him? Because he built a blueprint. That's why I tell him, back the Brinks truck up, baby. You know, you look at how the Steelers, the Green Bay Packers have always drafted offensive linemen, right? How they properly, especially in Green Bay, properly, groomed quarterbacks. And I said it's all come down to these teams have blueprints because they have identities. They know what they need to build. They know how they need to build it. And they know if they build those things correctly, that will create a sustainable formula to win championships. We don't have that. To be fair, and I've talked about this, Shula didn't create that sustainable formula even with Marino here. Even with one of the most naturally gifted passers of all time and the winningest head coach of all time, he couldn't create that sustainable formula. You know, like what Bill Walsh built in San Francisco and what Bill Walsh has said. What has he said? He would have won more championships with Marino than he did with Montana, right? You know, and we all thought Mike McDaniel was going to come in here and be, innovative like Bill Walsh, but it hasn't turned out to be that way. But okay, so my issue here is, like, again, another reason why I was smiling during that. The whole piece where Pelissero was sitting there telling each and every one of you, they're stuck with Tua's contract next year, and McDaniel's been the guy who's got him right. I mean, this is what I've been telling you guys. What is his argument going to be if he walks in Stephen Ross's office and says, give me more time? What did I say? You told me to bring here and fix your reclamation project. I got him the first Pro Bowl quarterback in Dolphins history in 30 years. He led the league in passing yards. He led the league in passer rating. Blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. Right? When everyone thought he was busted. And he's going to say no other coach could do that. Now, I still don't think... Okay, I got to say this too. This is where I'll push back on Pelissero about someone wanting to come in. Listen, you don't think they're going to have the conversation? This is why I go back to I've been asking the question, and let me know what you guys think in the comment section. Do you believe what I said a couple weeks ago, that are they secretly tanking? Nudge, nudge, hint, hint, wink, wink. For that same reason I just mentioned about McDaniel wanting more time, but also to draft his own quarterback. Because here's the thing. I still don't think McDaniel's unfireable, and this is why. If you land a top 5 pick, that is how you can entice a GM and a new head coach. You could say, yeah, you got to stick with Tua for 2026, but here's this shiny 3rd or 2nd overall draft pick. You can go get your guy if you believe you can get him with that. And we can groom him properly behind Tua for a year. You're not forced. Year 1's going to be a write-off. Do whatever you can do with Tua and a rookie and continue to build this thing out. This is what I've talked about, right? Build it out. You could, like, if you draft a quarterback this year, you can groom him for basically 2 off seasons, right? You have this free agency and draft to build out your roster. Then you'll have another free agency and draft to build out the roster before he even comes in. Well, reason, what if Tua balls out? Okay, now you have 2 tradable assets. I mean, how much did the Patriots live off that with guys like Garoppolo and Brissett and etc.? I don't care what those guys turned into. What did the Patriots turn them into? So, and I'm not even saying trade the. I mean, if you draft a kid top 5 overall, he is taking the reins. Listen, now all of a sudden, Tua's contract becomes easier to get out of. He's tradable. Now, you also have the out in 2027, but my whole point is, they're trying to spin this cap narrative on it, but man, if you take on a top 5 quarterback, why be forced to play him in year 1? Why? So I don't know if but the way they're framing it is that whoever the GM is going to have to stick with McDaniel and Tua, at least for 2026. Now, again, I said maybe that's why McDaniel and Ross are like, okay, you're keeping me for another year, Steven? All right, let's tank this out so at least, we can get a good GM in here with a top 5 pick. Because I'm going to tell you this. I think that could even impact their hiring decision. Do you keep a guy like Champ Kelly, who, how much experience does he have? And that's a lot of pressure for his first draft. Or do you go with a guy who's been an assistant GM for like 10 years or 6 years and really been in the war room next to someone? You know what I mean? I mean, like, and by that I mean like, a Ray Agnew or an Ed Dodds. Guys who are also known for scouting, right? Like, because that's the thing too, because, I could see people saying, I've been down the Chris Grier experience. I don't want to do the scouting thing all over again. I didn't get that. But you got to have a guy who's got a track record if you're going to put a top 5 pick in some way, shape, or form of either it's known in circles, he was the guy who pushed for this pick, or he does have a scouting background because, oh boy. Man. Whew. I mean, that's a lot of pressure to put on. Like, let's say you made Brandon Shore the interim GM, right? Like, that'd be a lot of pressure to put on a guy who's like a cap guy. Like, you better hope they surround themselves with the right football minds, So, like, I'm just using Brandon Shore as an example. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, you better have your P's and Q's in order, because that's a big time spot to be in, and you can't afford it. Now, Champ Kelly does have, he's director of pro scouting in Chicago, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In Denver, I think he was assistant coordinator of pro and college scouting too. He was also a college scout before that. So he does have a scouting background, with Champ Kelly does, 110%. All right. But, you know, he was the interim general manager, right? From what, 2023 to 2024, right? Until Tom Telesco, basically. So, right, and it wasn't even that long. It was like November to January. So he didn't even get to handle a draft as a GM. But with Chicago, right, he was all about grading the top 100 draft prospects, leading the, and doing advanced scouting and stuff. So he does have a scouting background, right? So, but I mean, that's pressure. Holy jeez, top 5. But hey, we'll see. We'll see what he does at the deadline. But that's why I think if Champ Kelly impresses them, I mean, this GM search might be over and it might be more internal than people give it credit for. But, it's, man, listen, I'm going to have a video on Monday all about this. We're going to talk about this in the video. So yeah, like in terms of the whole GM thing, but he's probably on board with McDaniel already, and two if he has to be. So that's step 1. I'm just saying, that's step 1. I'm sure he's clearly already on board with it right now. It's not like he took over and fired everyone. So it's going to be interesting to see how he handles the trade deadline too, right? So as the world turns, so do the days of our Dolphin fanhood lives. I swear to God. But yeah, listen, I wouldn't just automatically hire him. I would still go through the search, right? I would still interview people. You know what I mean? Obviously, he's getting a chance to show his worth and show his ability right now, but you'd do an injustice just to hire him at the end of the season, and just because you think he might be a yes man and fall in line with McDaniel and Tua. Listen, I'm going to say this. McDaniel and Tua should not dictate your general manager search. Whoever you hire should have the right to come in here and decide the future of his coaching staff and the whole 53 roster, not just the quarterback position. What are we saying here? I said this, people have short memories, right? But if you go back to before we hired McDaniel, what did I say? I wanted, Mike McDaniel, or I wanted Harbaugh, right? I wanted us to pluck him from Michigan. And specifically with Harbaugh, people were like, reason, what if he doesn't want Tua, right? And what did I say back then? I'll say this all over again. Brother, I don't care. They need to do what they got to do. A new regime comes in here. You just got to trust them until they show you that they're untrustworthy. You bring in a Ray Agnew and Ed Dodds, someone like that. You think I'm going to sit here and say, oh, no, no. Let them work their magic. Let's see what these guys got. I'll say the same for Champ Kelly right now in the trade deadline. Do I think he's now being greenlit to move assets that Chris Grier didn't want to move? 110%. Now, I think the asking price on some of them are probably, a lot higher than people give it credit for. But yeah, I think he's a little bit more open to collaboration. So, but until he proves that he's untrustworthy, I got to judge him move by move. So, but yeah, McDaniel and Tua should not be, whoever comes in here should be able to decide what they want to do. They should, you already meddled with McDaniel, and I didn't like it when you hired him. You wanted to hire Fangio, you made him keep Boyer. Right? You made him keep Tua, you made him keep Liam, you made him keep Austin Jackson, you made him keep all these things. Danny Crossman. Stop meddling, man. That's one of the major issues too, because not only do you meddle, but Bill Parcells was right when he said in his book that he didn't believe Stephen Ross would ever surround himself with good football minds, and that's exactly what's happened. So, yeah. And, Barry Jackson basically confirmed that this is exactly what was happening. Right? Like, Barry Jackson basically already told us what time it was. When you look here at what he said, while the Dolphins parted ways with general manager Chris Grier on Friday, owner Stephen Ross is planning to keep coach Mike McDaniel through at least the end of the season, barring a dramatic change of heart, a league source confirmed Friday. McDaniel, who has a 30-30 regular season record as Dolphins coach, could be let go at the end of this season, but that's not all certain. He will be given an opportunity to make a case to keep his job beyond 2025, a decision that will be based partly by the team's performance during the final 8 games of the season. Ross still believes in McDaniel, but is evaluating everything, the source said. Another factor helping McDaniel, Ross believes he's best equipped to maximize Tua Tagovailoa, who's due $54 million guaranteed next season with a $56.4 million cap hit. I mean, we don't got to go any further. He wants to keep McDaniel, and he believes McDaniel's best at maximizing Tua. And that's the issue we're running into right now. He's not running this like a football team. He's running this as a business. He doesn't know when, he's like Chris Grier. He doesn't know when to bail when the investment is saying, yo, man, you should not be allowing Tua's contract to keep McDaniel, and in turn now the new GM has to keep both. Come on, man. What kind of Mickey Mouse operation is this? Like, you can't run the team like this. You can't. You got to find a great football mind as the next general manager, and you got to let them evaluate the whole situation and get rid of what needs to go. No ifs, ands, or buts. Unbelievable. So, yeah, I don't know. But all right, let's get into a little bit here. Ian Rappaport on Saturday dropped at evening before the World Series started, dropped a very interesting article that covered a lot of stuff. All right, so let's get into this right now. All right, let's get into this whole thing. Get it covered. Tua, McDaniel, a lot of stuff. Check this out. For the last several weeks, the Miami Dolphins have been a frequent recipient of trade calls with playoff-ready teams trying to pry a few key players. While there had been some dialogue, opposing general managers left feeling like now general manager Chris Grier had little interest in engaging. Things have now changed in Miami. Grier and the organization parted ways on Friday after nearly a decade. An interim general manager, Champ Kelly, and the rest of the team's current brass are far more open to deals, sources say. While previously a question about wide receiver Jaylen Waddle was met with a hard no, the team will now do its due diligence and at least consider offers for the star in his prime, sources say. Miami would still prefer not to trade Waddle, but the Dolphins are at least willing to weigh an offer that blows them away. So I think that means a la like Larry Tunsil, With an uncertain future at several key places, all options are now on the table. Here's a look at what questions and scenarios await Miami both now and this coming offseason. What is Tua Tagovailoa's future? The quarterback question in Miami has become a problem in recent days. Tagovailoa has struggled through a brutal start to the season with 11 interceptions, which leads the league. Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel has long been a champion of Tagovailoa, knowing their futures are tied together. Tagovailoa has seen his most success under McDaniel, including a Pro Bowl selection in 2023, yet the interceptions have continued in bunches, and the Dolphins are 2-7 this season following Thursday's blowout loss to the Ravens. If nothing changes, it is reasonable that Miami would consider a quarterback change. Zach Wilson has resumed his role as number 2 quarterback in Miami and has experience with 33 starts with the Jets. Wilson is one option. 7th-round rookie Quinn Ewers impressed enough to replace Wilson for one game recently as Tagovailoa's primary backup, and he's come on in practice as well. The possibility that Ewers could play meaningful snaps if Tagovailoa continues to struggle should not be discounted. Tagovailoa's play would have to really fall off for Miami to either turn to Wilson or Ewers, but a potential benching is not off the table at some point this season. Tagovailoa signed a 4-year, $212.4 million contract extension during the 2024 offseason in a deal done by Athletes First, and he is tied to Miami through 2026 with $54 million fully guaranteed next year. Tagovailoa also has $3 million of his 2027 salary that becomes guaranteed on the third day of the 2026 league year. Essentially, the team is on the hook for $57 million if he plays for them next season. Miami does have options, however. One is to move forward with him as a starting quarterback for next season. Second option is to cut him in the upcoming offseason, as the Broncos did with Russell Wilson in 2024 while taking a hit of $85 million in dead salary cap, the largest dead cap in league history. If the Dolphins release Tagovailoa this offseason, it would set a new record of cap hit of $114.2 million. Miami could spread that out if he's designated as a post-June 1st cut, which would be $55.4 million in 2026 and $61.6 million in 2027. It would be costly, but Denver did it, and Miami could be similar to withstand such a hit if he decides that's what's best for the franchise. Another option, which seems more viable, is pay down some of the salary next offseason and trade him as a bridge quarterback for a team in transition or one that has a young QB they'd like to have sit. Would a team pay a portion of Tagovailoa's salary to have a bridge starter? Likely they would. This is what the Dolphins' offseason apart will be about. What's Mike McDaniel's future? McDaniel was not part of Friday's front office shakeup with Grier. Sources say the fourth-year head coach, who was 30-30 during his tenure, is staying for the foreseeable future with the hope that he continues to coach through 2025 and beyond. As has been the case for months, owner Stephen Ross likes McDaniel, respects him, has invested in him, and hopes he's the future coach for this team. No doubt McDaniel has felt the ill effect of the roster Grier put together, but at least McDaniel, it appears, will have the opportunity to finish strong and state his case to return for the 2026 season. If the on-field product really suffers, however, and the players essentially stop playing for him, changes could be made prior to the end of the season. But it's safe to say that the organization hopes McDaniel is their coach for the future, believing in him as the key people did while he led them to the playoffs in the first two seasons in 2022 and 2023. McDaniel has 3 years left on his contract, signed during the 2024 offseason beyond this campaign. How open will Miami be to trades? The last time Kelly was an interim GM with the Raiders in 2022, it was after the league's trade deadline. He didn't have the opportunity to execute any deals. It's far different this time. The 2025 NFL trade deadline on Tuesday. Waddle is the biggest piece on offense on the trade block following Tyreek Hill's season-ending injury. Teams obviously called Grier and were told Waddle would not be traded, though now 27-year-old who signed a 3-year, $84 million extension last offseason carries a low base salary for this year, comes to the forefront with Grier no longer in the picture. Sources say the Dolphins would at least consider dealing Waddle. It would be expensive, as young stars in their prime are, but not off the table. Something would have to blow the doors off for them to deal him. But at least GMs aren't being pushed to voicemail metaphorically. With a dearth of pass catchers available at the deadline, Waddle becomes the hottest commodity. Miami also has received significant interest in their edge rushers, with Jaelan Phillips and Bradley Chubb receiving the most interest. Matt Judon is a player who could be traded as well. Phillips is on his 5th-year rookie option, and teams would have to pay the rest of his $13.25 million salary this year. That's different from Chubb, who's due at $11 million plus incentives this year, though Miami has already paid $7.445 million of that in a signing bonus. Chubb is also on the books for $43.5 million for 2026 and 2027. Both have value. Phillips is younger. Chubb is cheaper. Expect Miami to make at least one trade prior to Tuesday's 4 p.m. deadline, but it could be more. So, I don't think they're going to trade. Like, I knew Grier was already saying, that's why I was so hard on it, telling y'all they're not going to trade Waddle, because I knew Grier wasn't going to trade him. But even still, I think it's going to trade, to complete a trade for Jaylen Waddle, it's going to take, what we paid for Tyreek Hill. They're not going to trade him for, just a first and a third. I'm telling you right now. Because of that contract. All right, like, they are going to ask for some serious stuff here, man. Remember, Tyreek Hill got 5 draft picks, and they're going to ask for like 3 or 4. And it's because contractually it's a good deal. So it's not going to be like, a first round pick and a 5th round pick. No, it's going to take, like, when he's saying, look at, this is blow the doors off is what he says, right? Like, we're talking like Laramie Tunsil like level of what they're going to be asking for. It's not going to be cheap, and I don't think anyone's going to pony that up. I'm just going to throw that out there. I do not think anyone's going to pony that up. At all. So that's where I'm at with that. Now, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more here. Okay? We'll get into that next, actually. But with Tua, potentially being benched. I mean, listen, if the play continues to struggle, you got to see and you think you're going to have a top 5 pick. I mean, you got to see what you have with Ewers, number 1. Number 2, I mean, tank for that pick. Whether Tua is here or not, tank for that pick. We're 2-7. What do we got to win? What do we got to win right now? There's nothing to win. There's nothing to lose, but there is something to lose, and that's a top 5 pick. Now, in terms of McDaniel and what was said there about, if the players stop playing for him, I mean, have we not watched recent weeks? It didn't look like the players were playing for him, And what do we want this guy to finish 6-11 or 7-10? So we finish with like the 16th or 18th pick. I'm sorry, when it comes to getting this, either SHIT or get off the pot. Now, if he agrees to tank behind the scenes and you want to pull the rug out from him and replace him, knock yourself out. But I'm not telling this guy to win games right now. Are you crazy? We're 2-7. What do we got to go on a run for right now? You got to win the next 8 straight games, even have a shot at making the playoffs. What are we doing here? What are we doing here? Like, come on. Now, with Jaylen Waddle, all right? I want to show this. So this is just from Jaylen Waddle. This came out from Schefter. Schefter said, Dolphins highly unlikely to trade Jaylen Waddle. The Dolphins are willing to listen to offers on any of their players ahead of Tuesday's NFL trade deadline, but it is, in the words of one well-placed source, highly unlikely that Miami will trade Jaylen Waddle. The Dolphins are expected to trade away at least one of their pass rushers, according to league sources, but a trade involving Waddle would be exceedingly difficult to pull off for a variety of reasons. For starters, the Dolphins are expected to ask for, in the words of one source, a 1+ in any potential trade for Waddle, meaning they believe they would have to receive a first-round pick plus other compensation. Even though Waddle might be the wide receiver who has drawn the most interest around the league ahead of the deadline, sources do not expect that a team will be willing to part with a first-round pick along with other compensation, even as attractive as Waddle is to multiple teams. Could the Dolphins increase their demands in the next 48 hours? Anything is always possible in the NFL. But not only might Waddle be one of the Dolphins' best players, he's also playing on a contract that is scheduled to pay him about $40 million in 2026 and 2027, a strong value compared to with the contracts of some of the league's top wideouts. 26-year-old, a former first-round pick, has 41 catches for 586 yards and 4 touchdowns this year. He will make just over $16.6 million fully guaranteed in 2026, followed by just over $15.2 million fully guaranteed in 2027 if he is on Miami's roster on the third day of the 2026 league year. League sources believe, however, that there is a strong, even likely chance that the Dolphins will trade at least one of their pass rushers before the 4 p.m. deadline. Teams looking for pass rush help have their eyes on Phillips, Chubb, and Judon. The Dolphins got multiple calls on 3 players before Chris Grier's exit Friday, and sources expect those calls to intensify before the deadline. After Thursday's loss to the Ravens, Chubb said decisions on trades are out of his control. Phillips said his preference was to stay with Miami. The Dolphins and Grier parted ways Friday in what was described as a mutual decision. So, there you go. So, don't expect a Jaylen Waddle trade, which I'm telling you, no, they're going to ask for the moon. I'm telling you, they're going to ask for the moon. But let's get into the pass rushers, because there is a team emerging that does want Jaelan Phillips.
The trade deadline, Tuesday, 4 p.m. Eastern. Which playoff teams could still be looking to make some moves ahead of that deadline?
Yeah, so we are starting with the Steelers.
Okay.
I'm going to go with them because they've been looking for receiver help. We'll see if they pull the trigger on something, but they've been combing the market, talking to several teams about what might be available out there. Will New Orleans make a move with one of their receivers? They're sitting at 1-7. The Raiders have been struggling, and Jacoby Myers, veteran receiver, has requested a trade. So there could be action out there at that position. I expect the Steelers to be involved in calls, most likely after Sunday. This will heat up early next week. Then you got the Denver Broncos. I have them more of a window shopper right now, but two positions to keep an eye out with them. They're at least monitoring the offensive guard because Ben Powers, their starter, has been out a while. Probably won't be back until December. And then with their offense, they've been looking at, can we add a stretch receiver, a veteran out there who can go deep, get the ball. So we'll see if they make a move there. I'm not totally convinced yet. Then you got the Eagles. You see them there. They made a move this week for quarterback Michael Carter II out of the New York Jets. They might not be done. There is some belief among some circles league-wide that they could still add a pass rusher. One connection to at least keep in mind, defensive coordinator Vic Fangio was with Miami pass rusher Jaelan Phillips in 2023. Phillips had his best season under Fangio, so perhaps that's a call they make to Miami, see if they can pry that pass rusher out.
Man, that offense turned a corner the last couple of weeks, and now that defense aggregating more pieces. That is Jeremy Fowler. The files are not over. They will just simply wait.
So there you go. He's talking about the Eagles to the connected to Jaelan Phillips because of Fangio. Now, Fowler doubled down a little bit. He said, in talking with several teams today, belief is the Dolphins have more aggressive posture to trade market post Chris Grier firing. Champ Kelly has had discussions with teams since the promotion. Pass rusher a focus, sorting out Jaelan Phillips, Bradley Chubb futures. Part of the reason Jaylen Waddle trade unlikely would take a lot to make Miami consider per teams, possibly a 1+ more would have to be blown away. Now, Cam Wolf then chimed in and said, Philadelphia Eagles would like to trade for Dolphins edge Jaelan Phillips at right price per sources. I'm told Vic Fangio thinks highly of Phillips from their year together in Miami. He would help fill Eagles' need for another pass rusher. Remember, I said that this was a team to watch, the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, what I've heard is Miami wants like a 3rd-round pick for Jaelan Phillips. I don't know if they'll be getting that. That sure is a lot to ask for an oft-injured pass rusher. But, I think the reason why he's being shopped, here's the thing. Jaelan Phillips and Bradley Chubb, they're not in the futures of the Miami Dolphins. Either is Matthew Judon, right? Matthew Judon was a patch job by Chris Grier. Jaylen Waddle is in the future of the Miami Dolphins. That's why it's going to cost so much. I don't think they plan on extending Jaelan Phillips or, continuing to take on the hit that is Bradley Chubb's cap number. I think they've already come to those conclusions of those. And listen, I was asked today, hey, is the reason why Chris Grier was fired because they didn't want to make moves at the deadline was shut down? No. There were multiple reasons why Chris Grier was moved off of the roster construction in general. What you heard Tom Pelissero say that GMs thought around the league. Someone had to pay the piper, and Stephen Ross wanted to send a message without affecting the on-field product. Because for some reason this guy thinks it's going to turn around. Now, were they happy that he wasn't willing to deal any of his draft picks? No. They wanted a more collaborative effort, right? We heard Barry Jackson say in that article, last week, about how the trade deadline would extend beyond the desk of Chris Grier to Silman, Ross, and of course Garfinkel. But the general manager needs to be the one to pull the trigger. So if he's not willing to collaborate, I don't know. So, and really, I think another reason why they want to stockpile assets is not for only a rebuild, but if there's a quarterback they want, they're going to want to have assets to trade away. That's just the fact of the matter. So, Guys, do me the favor. Smash the like button. Subscribe if you are new. Enjoy your Sunday of football. I will see you on the next one where we will discuss the potential future general manager of the Miami Dolphins. So make sure you tune in on Monday for that show, all right? Fins up all day, every day. We'll see you all on the next one. Take it easy, everyone.